Who is the one player you wish you'd managed that you never did?
Paul Gascoigne, without question. I think he was the best English player since Bobby Charlton. I think he was a fantastic player.
Of all the most undeniably brilliant and talented English footballers in history, a good amount of them all seem to have their own flaws. Matt Le Tissier never aspired to leave Southampton and just wanted to play football he loved, in a club where he could do whatever he wanted. David Beckham slowly shifted his focus from being a near Ballon d'Or winning player to his endeavors and eventual career outside the pitch. And Wayne Rooney never kept up his fitness standards to the ability we all knew he had, and set his body up for an earlier retirement. But from the mid-80s to the late 90s, there was a guy who was so natural with the ball at his feet, who never really had to put that much effort into training and keeping up his fitness, but would still step onto the pitch and showcase a masterclass throughout every match he would play. And despite never playing for a largely successful club, he was proclaimed to be one of the best playmakers in the world. His name was Paul Gascoigne, or Gazza for short, and he was the real deal. These days, it's fair to say that many fans in this modern age of football are rightfully skeptical whenever they hear of any hype when it comes to English footballers. After all, the media, pundits, and honestly, even creators like myself are notorious for over-exaggerating the potential and skyrocketing the value of English players. So much to the point that there's tons of memes about it, even colloquially coining the term English tax. But with Paul Gascoigne, ask anybody who's watched him in his day or even remotely knows about him, and they'll all say he was legit. Heck, even in Manchester's National Football Museum, there's a description of Gazza that reads, widely recognized as the most naturally talented English footballer of his generation. But with such unplayable talent that made absolute fools out of the opposition, Paul Gascoigne is also infamously known to be the most flawed English footballing great in history. As good as he played and as beloved as he was from the entirety of English football fans, a variety of circumstances, some out of his control, but most directly fed from his personal demons and vices, Paul Gascoigne would slowly destroy his own career. But even sadder, he would slowly destroy himself. Here's a picture of Gazza in his early 20s, and here's how he looked like at just 40 years old. So today, let's look at exactly what made Paul Gascoigne so special to be regarded in such high light for his footballing ability, see how good he really was, and look back at the train wreck after train wreck of bad habits and behavior that would slowly derail his career. But I guess everyone has their fair share of vices and bad habits that are incredibly hard to break. But thanks to today's sponsor, Fume, an award-winning flavored air device, there's now the perfect alternative to breaking your bad habits. There's no vapor, no combustion, no nicotine, no toxic flavors, and no batteries involved, which means you can use Fume literally anywhere. Fume is also designed with fidgeting in mind, so it has incredibly satisfying clicks to help you stay calm whenever you're anxious. Plus, the materials, build, and weight really makes you feel the incredible quality. It's super easy to use, and some of my favorite flavors are their spearmint and maple pepper. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be their next success story. This holiday season, you can give the gift of better habits with Fume. So head to tryfume.com/RaymarFootball and use the code RaymarFootball to get a free Fume topper when you order a journey pack. It's the perfect addition to make your gift even more special this holiday season. Again, tryfume.com/RaymarFootball, or just scan the QR code on screen to grab yours now and make someone's holiday unforgettable. Paul Gascoigne was a character who was very flawed. He would battle addictions and feed his worst vices constantly throughout his life. As much of a genius as Paul Gascoigne was at football, he had an even greater share of inner demons, and it really all stems from his youth. Gazza experienced an incident that would shape his life psyche. He had taken his friend's younger brother to a nearby shop. Paul would lose sight of him just for the briefest of moments, then saw him suddenly get hit by a truck. Gazza would watch as the young boy would pass in front of him. This event would reverberate throughout his life. Even decades later, Gascoigne admitted that he never felt right after that moment. Around the same time, Gascoigne's father began suffering from severe seizures, and as a poorer family, you could imagine the difficulties it would bring. But as his father's condition worsened, Gascoigne would begin to exhibit similar symptoms himself. He would develop a twitch, along with compulsive and obsessive behaviors. And as a lower income family, Paul really worried about money, and he thought the only way he could make it was through gambling. But of course, this would soon lead up to him developing a gambling addiction. And in particular, he had a very strong obsession with slot machines. He was drawn to the lights, sounds, and temporary escape that the machines offered. But to no surprise, he wasn't making any money. So to fund his addiction, he would begin shoplifting. Already at a young age, Gazza was going through deep emotional turmoil. But despite the chaos surrounding him, there was a light reaching out to him. And the one saving grace would be football. On the pitch, he could forget about his fears, his guilt, his anxiety, and would even lose his twitch. Football would give him a sense of purpose, a place where all his trauma could momentarily fade away. But Paul Gascoigne was a complete natural. His development was incredibly minimal. He never had any formal training or anything, just playing with his friends in whatever pitch or street that they could manage. And Paul Gascoigne was far from coachable. The way he dribbled and controlled the ball wasn't technical, it was more instinctual, because he had not been in any single club until he was discovered by Newcastle at the age of 13. After a few years, Paul Gascoigne would be named Newcastle's youth team captain, even leading Newcastle to victory in the 1985 Youth FA Cup. And later that very same year, he would make his debut for the Newcastle first team. And it didn't take long for him to start to make waves. At his age, the ability to dictate play from the midfield with his vision, passing, and fearless dribbling made him incredibly unique. And by the 1987-88 season, there was no youngster better than Paul Gascoigne. From his skill alone, it would be clear that he would be an important part of England's future. By the end of the season, Gazza was handed the PFA Young Player of the Year award. And funnily enough, through his time at Newcastle's men's team, Gascoigne was known for being quite the eater. So much so that the opposition would refer to him as Fat Boy. But for Gazza, the extra weight actually helped him on the pitch. Although it didn't exactly help him become more agile, it really helped with his strength. By 20 years old, Paul Gascoigne was one of the most sought-after players throughout England. Sir Alex Ferguson really wanted to sign him on. In fact, he was so confident United could secure Gazza's signature that Sir Alex Ferguson decided to go on vacation, only to come back from holiday and find out that he signed with Tottenham Hotspur. It would probably be the most career-altering decision he would ever make, but let's talk more about that later. But anyways, Gazza wasn't just moving clubs, he was moving into a larger spotlight. And moving into a city like London, where his fame would explode and where the nightlife offered an array of distractions. Gazza was about to enter a whole new world. But it was at Tottenham where Gascoigne met Gary Lineker, a forward with a level head and a very disciplined lifestyle. And it would be Lineker who took on the role of a mentor, trying to keep Gazza on the straight and narrow path. And at the very least, Lineker's influence gave Gazza a sense of stability and kept him grounded, even if only temporary. Lineker's poise was the perfect match for Gazza and his flair, creativity, and wild playstyle. Together, they elevated Tottenham, with Gazza's unpredictable brilliance complementing Lineker's clinical finishing. But while Lineker did provide a stabilizing presence, Gazza's vices never really went away. His nights out in London grew wilder, continuing to indulge more and more in the excesses that came with the newfound fame and money. Of course, Gazza would still deliver on the pitch. He was still so incredibly naturally talented. But Gazza was a flame that was burning too brightly. But though a brief time, we saw it at Tottenham. When he did stay grounded and stay focused on football, Gazza was truly unplayable. And he would make the English First Division look easy. Because Gazza was truly a midfield boss. His control, vision, and creativity was one of a kind in England. And the way he played was just so unbound, unrestricted, and free. Out there, he was doing whatever he wanted, and he was making it look effortless. There was just something so natural about the way he carried the ball up the pitch. And you would be surprised to see a midfielder of his size and girth with the incredible creativity and passing ability that he had. And what really helped was Gascoigne's dribbling was exceptional. It's not like he used any complicated skill moves or anything, but his close control and surprisingly quick footwork paired with unbelievably convincing feints, again especially for a guy with his build, because you would never expect a guy like him to have the balance and agility that he had. Switching directions swiftly, opening spaces and creating chances for teammates, or bringing the ball up himself. Plus, his size allowed him to keep up with the bigger defenders, using his body and strength to keep them away. Truly a very unique combination of skills and physical build for a midfielder. and although he wouldn't score all the time, he would consistently turn difficult situations into goal-scoring opportunities. And in the 1990 World Cup, he would showcase this to the world, because Gazza would be the heart and soul of England's World Cup team. His dazzling runs, clever touches, and fearless play completely ignited the nation. His playmaking was arguably the best in the entire tournament. He would provide assists in the group stages, round of 16, and a quarterfinal, playing some of the best football in his career. Truly, Gazza was the heart of England's attack. But in the semi-final against Germany, Gazza picked up a yellow card that would rule him out of the final if England were to progress. Realizing the implications, he would famously break down in tears. It was that vulnerability and raw display of emotion that made him a national treasure. Gazza wasn't just a footballer. People saw him as a flawed but very complex person who just so happened to be incredibly good at football. Someone who wore his heart on his sleeve. But despite England's loss in the semi-final and the World Cup being a highlight of his incredible ability, he would reach a peak in his career before making a sharp descent. Because that season in Tottenham following the World Cup would probably be the best season in Gazza's career. This was a season when Gascoigne's genius was truly undeniable. Not only did he get a huge boost of popularity from the World Cup, but he would impress even further in the First Division. He was controlling games, scoring goals, and making a fool out of the opposition. He would go on to score 19 goals and have 4 assists in 37 appearances, helping carry Tottenham all the way to the FA Cup final. However, just 15 minutes into the biggest match of the season, Gascoigne would go in for a tackle where he would have an excruciating knee injury, going on to tear his anterior ligament. And even though Tottenham would go on to win the trophy that day, from that point on, Gazza's career would slowly start to go into freefall. Perhaps if Gascoigne was able to stay on the pitch for that final win, he might have very well been named the PFA Player of the Year, an award that would instead go to Manchester United's Mark Hughes. And if you look at their stats, they're both quite comparable. But Gascoigne was undoubtedly more efficient, because while West German footballer Lothar Matthäus would lift the 1990 Ballon d'Or, Gascoigne would finish in 4th. In hindsight, many look back to this day and would say if not for his reputation and negative image, Gascoigne would have finished in 2nd. And if England had won that World Cup, he would have won the award, with some of Gazza's teammates even saying Gascoigne was challenging Maradona as the best player in the world at the time. But his injury required extensive surgery and rehab, keeping Gascoigne off the pitch for the next entire season. And you can imagine after having such highs in the World Cup and for your club, only for things to go down the way it did in the most important match of the season, watching your team celebrate as you're sat there with a horrible injury. Being the kind of person that Gazza was with his complex history and past trauma, Gazza's drinking habits would significantly worsen, as he used alcohol as a struggle to cope with the frustration and isolation. And it wouldn't help that Tottenham would agree to send him off to Lazio. The Italians witnessed just how brilliant Gazza was, but after a year of recovery, moving to a completely different country, being surrounded by a foreign language and a culture that took football seriously, for Gazza, it would be far from a smooth transition. The Italian fans had high expectation, and Gascoigne's inconsistency and eccentric behavior didn't always sit well with them. Of course, he would still show moments of brilliance that reminded everyone why he was regarded as England's most naturally gifted player. But although he still had the touch and control, after the injury his body wasn't moving as agile as it used to. And it didn't help that Gazza would also start to gain a lot more weight, eventually being diagnosed with medical bulimia, which is basically a serious problem with uncontrolled overeating. The Italian press scrutinized his every move, focusing more on his vices with alcohol, partying, and binge eating. And while his teammates did respect his skill, there was a sense that Gascoigne truly didn't belong there. And while his move to Lazio was supposed to be a fresh start, it would only make his addictions and compulsive behaviors worse. However, Gazza would find one last spark in his career, as in 1995 he would move to Scotland to play with the Rangers. At least he was back in the UK, and the Rangers manager Walter Smith understood Gazza's complexities, doing his very best to find ways to accommodate his very sporadic midfielder. And in Scotland, Gazza was given the freedom to play the way he liked, going back to the style where he was allowed to express himself on the midfield. And with that, suddenly new life was sparked into Gascoigne. In his first season, he would have 19 goals and 2 assists in 42 matches, just a couple goals shy of becoming the club's top goal scorer as a midfielder, helping the Rangers lift the Scottish Cup trophy and be crowned the Scottish Premier Division champions. And after all these years, it finally looked like Gazza had found a new home, playing the way he played best, in an environment where he really belonged. However, it wasn't all that great for his vices, with his time in the Rangers and Scotland in general probably being the most alcohol-fueled in his entire career. But when Gazza was happy, he was playing his very best. In his second season with the Rangers, he would go on to score 17 goals in 34 matches, helping his club win back-to-back Scottish Premier Division titles. Once more, just a couple of goals away from being the club's top goalscorer. But without a doubt, his most legendary moments with the Rangers would be in the League Cup final. As in halftime, Gazza would infamously get drunk, taking shot after shot of whiskey, before getting back onto the pitch, scoring 2 goals and lifting the League Cup trophy, reportedly being so drunk that he forgot what happened the next day. And while he did find individual and club success with the Rangers, perhaps he did have a little too much freedom. His drinking habits would worsen, and they would take a toll on his body and stamina as well. After those first 2 very successful seasons, his commitment and brilliance were getting fewer and further between. That impulsive behavior that once made him endearing now seemed more like a burden. Alcohol was becoming an unshakable part of his existence. His relationships were deteriorating. His marriage was falling apart, and incidents of public intoxication and reckless behavior became increasingly common. The Rangers would eventually release him, as even manager Walter Smith couldn't handle the snowballing Gascoigne. He would then jump around clubs like Middlesbrough, Everton, and Burnley. However, the Gazza of old was no longer. The years of alcohol abuse would really do a number on his physicality. It would also make his mental health become a lot worse, and all that drinking would eventually lead him to further get more injury prone. And as he got more injured and less playtime, the alcohol consumption would also in turn get worse. By the end of his career, the look of Gazza's physical state really shows just how much the alcohol affected him, getting into out-of-the-pitch controversies more and more often, with even his biggest fans and supporters unable to deny his freefall. It's perhaps the saddest thing is that now, when you listen to Gazza talk, it's incredibly difficult to make out what he's saying, as his speech is permanently turned into all but a drunken mumble. And even just at the age of 57, Gascoigne looks like he's decades older. Perhaps if he had signed with Man United, with Sir Alex Ferguson's impeccable man management, he could have definitely made a longer positive impact in Gazza's career. In the end, Gazza became a symbol, not just for footballing talent, but for the dangers of unchecked fame, mental health, and addiction. He was a player who could make fans believe in magic, yet at the same time a man who couldn't control the forces pulling him under. A reminder that even the most naturally gifted athletes are at their core only human. Thanks to Fume once again for sponsoring this video.